Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this episode of One-on-One. I'm Martin Foss. Today we have a very special guest. She has risen in politics, but she's been around the community for quite some time. Miss Beryl Amedee is going to be my guest today on One-on-One. Stick around. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. Growing up, from Caldwell, you went to Bourgeois?
To Evergreen first.
Oh, to Evergreen, that's right.
Yes.
Forgot about Evergreen.
Yes.
Evergreen's always that little
It's that little
school.
side route.
Yeah.
From Caldwell, the students who were in some extracurricular activity would be routed to Evergreen, and the students who were not would go straight to Bourgeois. That's why the 9th grade at the time was always smaller, because the students in band or choir or football or whatever would end up going to Evergreen.
Yeah.
And so I was in choir and on the dance team.
Who was principal when you were at Bourgeois?
Fletcher.
Was it Luther?
Yes,
Yeah.
Luther Fletcher. Yep.
Who grew up right across the street from me. And him and Dad had a deal. If his kids snuck out the window, Dad called Luther. If I snuck out, Luther called Dad. I didn't learn that until years later when I'm sitting on the swing with Dad. I said, how you knew when I was always sneaking out? Me and Luther had a deal.
That was back in the day before the security cameras. You had something better. You had neighbors.
Yeah. The neighbors were pretty vocal. Well, the neighborhoods raised the kids.
Yes.
Today, it's a little more contentious with neighborhoods because nobody wants you to tell their kids what to do. But
Right.
back then, if Miss Haydell or Miss Julia or Luther or anybody was correcting us, that was okay. Mom and Dad appreciated it.
Probably because back then, most neighborhoods, the people living in them had relationships with their neighbors. Today, there are people who don't even know their neighbors' names. So why would you want someone to correct your child if you don't even know their name? There's no relationship.
Yeah, the world has changed for that matter.
Yeah. Well, we don't sit out on the porch every afternoon anymore and chat with the neighbors. Now everybody is indoors and doing their own thing.
When did you meet John? Did you meet him in high school?
In junior high, actually.
Junior high.
We were in choir together.
Really?
Yeah. He was a year ahead of me.
Were you a boyfriend, girlfriend back then?
Not in junior high. There's this gap. He was in the 8th grade. He was in the 9th grade. I was in the 8th grade when I was at Evergreen and in that first year. And so he was going to be going off to Bourgeois, and then I would still be at Evergreen.
Yeah.
So I guess at that time, that might have been considered a long-distance relationship. So no.
And there were no cell phones.
No cell phones.
We had carrier pigeons back then.
Right.
But
Pass along
did y'all
notes.
live close to each other?
No, and that was another problem. Do you remember long distance?
Yeah.
Well, long distance was expensive, and so coming from Schriever, I would say probably 2/3 of the students at Evergreen would have been long distance from me.
Really?
Oh yeah, because where the lines changed from the Thibodeau Exchange to the Houma Exchange
Yeah.
was right at St. Bridget Church.
Okay.
So anyone who lived from 311 on towards, well, all the way to the coast was in the Houma Exchange, so that was considered long distance.
So you had to dial the 1 before you called.
Yes, and you had to talk really fast and get off the phone really quick or your parents would really be angry.
Look, for people watching, especially the young ones, they don't know, the other day I have this dial phone that used to be for the police. It was on all the telephone poles, and the police would stop at the light and they could call in. Well, I asked some of the students to try to make it work, and they were pushing the numbers, and they weren't. And when I showed them that, they were intrigued. When did you and John start becoming the boyfriend, girlfriend?
When I got to H.L. Bourgeois,
Okay.
yeah, it was fall of '79, and I was in the 10th grade and he was in the 11th grade.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. At that time, I was looking for Jesus,
Yeah.
and he had more of Jesus than anybody else that I knew. And not only that, I tell people, and it was wrapped in such an attractive package. So I thought he was a really good-looking guy, and he knew about Jesus. So there was an instant attraction there.
Right.
And sometime right after the beginning of the school year, we knew each other from choir, and so he would, he'd say hello and all that, and we would chat a bit, and eventually I don't know what they call it today, but back then we said going out. The generation before me,
Right.
it was going steady.
Right.
These are really old
Right.
terms. So he said, do you want to go out? And so it was October 12th where we decided that we were going to be boyfriend and girlfriend.
Holy cow, you remember the date?
Yep,
October 12th.
yep.
Where'd y'all go on your first date?
He came to my house for my birthday 2 days later. So I guess that would be our first date. That's where we first said,
Yeah.
hey, let's get together at such and such a time. He came over to the house, and then he fussed me for not telling him that it was my birthday. And I said, well, we just started going out. I didn't want you to feel like you were obligated to get me a gift or anything.
Yeah.
And so he came over
Yeah,
for
let's
dinner.
go out. By the way, it's my birthday. Can I have a purse?
I was going to tell him after my birthday had passed. That way
Right.
he wouldn't feel obligated,
Were
But
were
he
your
came over for
parents
dinner.
strict?
It's hard to say whether they were strict or not strict because you'd have to consider the times.
They were disciplined, and I'm sure y'all were disciplined.
Oh, we had
everybody.
rules, definitely.
Was John nervous when he went to the house the first time?
I'm not sure. I think we were just excited that both of our parents said yes because he had to,
Yeah.
this was before we were driving. I think, I don't think he had his license yet. I think somebody had to drop him off.
Yeah.
So we had to coordinate all this. We had to get permission.
Yeah. And to dial at 1 plus the number to get it all done.
Yes, or to avoid a lot of that, we had to make all these plans at school
Right.
and then only call if something changed to avoid long
Oh,
distance.
that's pretty cool.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
What was Luther like? He was boss hog.
Mm-hmm.
Was it seemed like, well, I remember Bourgeois when we used to go in there to play basketball or anything from Vanderbilt. Their halls were like a freeway.
Yes.
It was so wide and so modern. It looked like a pretty fun place to go to school.
I think that it was. As a high school student at the time, we might not have liked some of the rules or what have you, but I would have to say, as a principal, Luther Fletcher, our boss hog, was fun because he really worked at trying to be available to the students, trying to be accessible, trying to participate, and that's how he got the nickname Boss Hog. It's after a character off of a TV show,
Right.
the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was for pep rallies that he would dress up in that white suit like the
Right.
character, and that's how he got the nickname. And I guess it stuck because anybody who went to school while he was principal knew him as Boss Hog. And he would come to the pep rallies and participate in the jokes and the revelry and stuff. And I think that made him, it kind of endeared him to us.
Right.
Now, as students at the time, we were probably grumpy about it, like, oh, Boss Hog, he's got this rule, he's going to fuss me for this or that.
Right.
But not long after you leave high school, you realize you're an adult, and then you look back on that and
Yeah.
start trying to think about things like, what would I have done?
Right.
What if it was my job? What if I had to, as an adult, had to relate to all these high school students? So
Yeah.
I think I guess it was ingenious
Yeah.
of him to really go all out.
And it was attention getting for sure, When did you and John get married?
So I graduated in '82 in May, and
Yeah.
we were married in October of '82.
Not October 12th.
October 12th fell in the middle of a week, so
Oh, okay.
we moved it to the 15th.
That'd
We felt
be
like
cool,
if you have,
though, huh?
yes,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, if you have like a midweek evening wedding, who's coming?
Yeah.
So weekends were better. And so we got married. Right after high school, the guidance counselors at HL kept begging me to go to college, but to be honest, I was tired of being required to study certain things that I really wasn't interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do self-guided or self-directed study. And I thought about college, and I decided I'm going to take a break because I felt like I have been in the classroom all this time. I need to breathe. Mostly what I wanted to do was go to work. I had begged my parents from the time I was 14 or 15 to let me get a job.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally had to agree because in high school I took something called COE, or Cooperative Office Education.
Mm-hmm.
And that required me to go to work part-time in the 12th grade to earn both a letter grade and a paycheck. And I was thrilled about it, and they agreed to it. So right out of high school, I wanted to go to work full-time, and I did. I went to work in an office in an oil field company. At that time, we were planning our wedding, and this was when the oil field began to get shaky. And after 3 months on the job, I actually got laid off because the company was closing. They kept the office staff that had been there for a long time to be able to go through all the files and package up what they needed to do legally to close the business. And I was just a newcomer, so they let me go. I jokingly tell people that as far as jobs go, that might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's because after 3 months as the secretary at this company, I was laid off. It was a good thing because nobody ever explained to me that when you become the secretary, I guess now it's the office manager or assistant, 5 years down the road, usually, that's still what you are. What I didn't realize is the secretary usually did not end up becoming the boss, the owner of the company. And so I felt like, I don't know that I want to go back to this kind of job. I think I'd really rather own a business. And then we were married, and then we started having children, and we decided that while the children were young, I'm staying home. You remember how I said that it was always important to me as a child having both my parents home at night. Right. Some of my fondest memories are getting off the school bus after school and walking into the house, and my mom's there, and supper is cooking, and the kitchen smells great, and all this. Some of my least favorite school days were the days when I got off the bus and came home and no one was home. You know, the latchkey kid syndrome. I hated being in the house all by myself, you know, having to wait till my mom got home. And so we chose that I would not work while the children were young. And maybe once they got of school age, I would get a job during the day and be home in the evenings. And lo and behold, a few years fast forward, we chose to homeschool. So there wasn't a time when we sent the children to school, and it made it to where I was a stay-at-home mom who also sometimes did part-time work or, you know, other things to help supplement the household income when needed.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
How did somebody with all this energy, and you were saying that you were multitasking, how were you disciplined enough to sit down there and teach children? Wasn't that sort of not a challenge, I guess it would be a challenge, but one you obviously did well, but did you have to sort of morph into that?
Not really.
Or did it come natural?
I think it came naturally because when we had our first son, he was obviously the only child at the time, and I was with him during the day. You know, I would do my work and pay bills and cook and whatever I needed to do. In between all that, we would play because he was an only child, and unless we'd go visit somebody, I'm it. So when I would get tired of playing with the little cars or whatever it is we were doing, then I would teach him whatever he was interested in. He was a really bright child, so it helped because when you have a child who takes all the little Matchbox cars and then decides he's going to line them up by color or by type or by style, and he's enjoying that, then this is great. So it was easy to just natural to teach him numbers and colors and letters and all that.
In homeschooling, you know, today they sort of doing that, they specialize. They find out what the student likes, what they're really interested in, and they're starting to specialize. Well, when we were going to school, we didn't have a chance to specialize. You went to reading class or French or math or science, but now they sort of specialize. I guess in homeschooling, you could sort of see with each child where they were going, and you could sort of cater it to them, right?
You could, and you say that we don't back then, or we didn't back then, but in a way we did. I can remember, at least by junior high, they were giving us these little quizzes and surveys, and you were supposed to be taking these to figure out, I think they were called aptitude tests, and there were some
Right,
others.
yeah.
They would help us, by the time we got to high school, to choose our high school subjects based on where we were probably headed. If you were college bound, or if you were going into the trades, or just whatever. So there was a level of seeking where your interests were, or where your gifts were. You know, if you have a child who's amazing in math, then this might be a child that you want to steer towards the higher maths and have them take maybe even college level courses while they're still in high school.
Well, now
So,
that you say it, you're right.
yeah, this
Yeah.
existed back then too.
I guess it wasn't as new as I thought, I guess. Maybe I didn't pass it,
Somebody probably analyzed yours and
Yeah.
directed your courses that you were assigned based on that. If
Yeah.
you weren't aware of it, it was probably the school and your parents working it
That's
out.
a good point.
Because it's been around a long time. Now, sometimes they do this in a more extreme manner, a more focused manner, but they generally did it. But raising the boys, all I was doing was whatever was next, whatever was next. So if you now know the sounds that all the letters make, then let's put those together, and this is how a word is made. And so what happened was my oldest son, at his 4th birthday, he read his birthday cards to us before he opened his gifts. And he had already read my entire box set of Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie books for fun in his 4-year-old year. I didn't ask him to, I didn't require him to. He found them in my box of my old toys, and he pulled them out and he read them because he wanted to. So he was pretty advanced in that, and maybe that helped because it encouraged me to say, well, we'll just keep showing him the next thing and the next thing. And so we picked that up as how we were raising our children. We did that with all of the boys all the way through. But looking back, maybe that's been a part of our family, because my grandparents would tell us stories about my dad and his siblings. When they were children, my grandmother said, we made sure that all of our children knew a few certain things before we let them leave the house to go to 1st grade. You know, there was no kindergarten back then. They made sure that every one of their children could write their names, recite their address, count to, I forgot what number she said, at least 20 as a child, if not 100, spell 3-letter words. Now, my grandmother made sure that they could do this before they left home to go to school. So maybe it's just been passed down in our family that this is how you play with toddlers. You show them the next thing.
And I guess once you set the template in their brain or in their mind, they sort of go from there. It sets a pattern.
It worked.
Yeah, it sets a pattern.
Yes, and it worked. My grandparents had about, at that time, they had 7 grandchildren, and all of the grandchildren did well in school. I don't think it's so much because of genetics as much as lifestyle. So we expected that children can learn, and we always were open to show them whatever the next thing is, whether it was with math and reading or whether it was with a skill, you know, using your hands, building something, fixing something. And so that's just how we related.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.